So now we're getting to the portion of the video. It's the last 22 minutes or so of Jeff and Shalea's response, where they're talking in a bit more detail about the students who've left, their ex-students who've been speaking out about them. So let's go.
Majority of our students' experiences. And I want to get back to this um, relationship between our students and the disagreement, with the former students. And they just had an upset they didn't want to work through. And if you think, well, what did all this hold on now. It's a simple statement.
Yeah.
But remember, this work is hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, you can't.
These subtle digs that he makes, it's very insidious, it's very manipulative and subtle, where he says this work is hard, essentially implying or outright saying these students who have made these accusations, made these allegations, are simply lazy. They didn't want to do the hard work. They didn't want to look at their own issues or their own upsets. I really have come to loathe that word. But it's the exact same strategy that we see from MLM leaders when they have members of their team who quit and then start speaking out about how they were treated. It's even something that MLM leaders say about members of the anti-MLM movement. Oh, well, they just didn't want to put in the hard work. They just didn't have success, and that's made them bitter, and that's caused them to blame us for their lack of success. It's such a tired, it's almost a trope at this point. It's such a tired excuse. And I really had kind of hoped that Jeff and Shaleia had a better defense, but it seems that this is the best that they can come up with. Oh, our students just didn't want to do the work.
The appropriate response is not to be upset at hurt people. And these people might want to say that we're the cause of their hurt because it probably really feels that way.
I understand, yeah.
Because the nature of this teaching, thanks for listening. We're finally getting to the core of it.
We're getting to the core of it.
I know, we're an hour into it. I mean, I know I can be wordy and long-winded, so I'm not necessarily criticizing them for that, but these are very serious accusations, and Jeff and Shaleia are being so flippant about it. I mean, not that we really expected much better from them. Anyway, let's see what they have to say.
The nature of this teaching is very simple. Your mind works like an onion. Layers, right? Like an ogre. Thanks, Shrek. Onions have layers.
Oh.
Your mind has layers. And you can really only easily access the topmost layer in the healing process.
I actually don't disagree with him about this whole concept of layers. I think when you're talking about layers of consciousness and what you can most easily access in a conscious state of mind, and also when we're talking about trauma and healing from trauma, there are layers to it, and that's why healing from trauma takes such a long time. The difference is that trauma leaves a person in a very vulnerable state, and the healing process needs to be overseen and supervised by someone who is skilled and someone who has the expertise and ethics to guide someone through the healing process, which, as I said, can take a long time. Jeff and Shaleia are not qualified, and their methods are not underpinned by any sort of research or science or proven psychological methods. They're taking people who are in a vulnerable state, people who do need healing, and exploiting them. And that's what I find so reprehensible, as does, I think, nearly everyone who has a problem with this group. It's so reprehensible to claim that you can take people through those layers of healing, through those different layers of bringing things into conscious awareness, without actually having the like, oh, it just makes me so cross without having the expertise to be able to do that.
Peel that layer off through self-awareness and self-love, and we'll teach that. We teach that in our community. When you pull up that layer, there's a new layer beneath it, and what you see there, you really might not like. Oftentimes, you don't, and there are some things that you're really gonna like.
But the thing is, when you are working with a qualified therapist, with a therapist who has the expertise to guide you through the healing process, even if you do stop halfway through therapy, it's not going to leave you in this absolute, you know, true therapy, real therapy won't leave you in this vulnerable, raw state where you are just kind of reeling from all these emotions and these things that you've uncovered. A skilled, expert therapist is trained to be able to close the wound to a certain degree before you leave the therapy session so that you're not in an overly vulnerable state just going off, by yourself. If you have peeled back a layer, a skilled therapist is supposed to give you the tools to be able to navigate that on your own for a bit. Like, yes, you may need support, but it's not this dependency that Jeff and Shaleia create. Jeff and Shaleia don't promote healing, they promote dependency, in my opinion. And as I mentioned, an actual skilled therapist will be able to close the wound a little bit like a surgeon. Like, a surgeon doesn't just perform surgery on you and then, release you out into the world, out of the operating theater without having stitched up the surgical wound. And a therapist is a little bit like that. They're trained to 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 provide a little bit of closure in so that you are not feeling overly vulnerable when you leave therapy. It sounds like what Jeff and Shaleia are admitting to. They're ex-students who were, very upset, who are speaking out about the harms of Twin Flames universe, are saying that they just turn vulnerable people loose without the skill to help them close those wounds. And I mean, of course, Jeff and Shaleia don't have those skills. They have no credentials whatsoever.
Mind self. What you see there, you really might not like. Oftentimes, you don't, and there are some things that you're really gonna like. As you're uncovering your divine self, beautiful light shines through you, and this really uncomfortable darkness comes up. This is metaphorical in terms of dialogue. This is visceral in real lived experience. There is nothing like spiritual work. There is nothing more intense, more powerful, more difficult, or more rewarding than inner work.
It's not for the faint of heart.
No.
The spiritual path.
I
So they're essentially, again, just throwing shade at the former students, calling them faint-hearted, essentially saying they didn't want to do the work. They didn't actually want to do the difficult spiritual work. I mean, I personally take real issue with this claim. A lot of spiritual teachers, a lot of religious teachers will call spiritual work, very difficult. You even see this in mainstream in Christianity. They'll talk about it being a very difficult path, and I take issue with this because I think a lot of these so-called difficulties, a lot of these challenges, a lot of the things that people find particularly hurtful and difficult and challenging about doing this so-called spiritual work, I think a lot of those problems are actually created by the teachings themselves. And these are harms that are perpetrated a lot of the time actually within the spiritual community. It's not necessarily, you know, things that are being healed. I think they're harms and difficulties that are being perpetrated in a lot of cases. That's just my opinion.
enormous respect for anyone who endeavors to do even a little spiritual work. And this is why we didn't go out and say nasty things about the former students. We didn't go out and throw receipts or try to make them wrong.
Why didn't you bring receipts? I mean, I think we would have all loved to have seen that. If you actually have legitimate defenses to the things you're being accused of, if you actually have receipts to show that the things that were being said about you were not true, I think we all would have loved to see that. But of course, they're not going to provide those receipts because they don't have them, because there is actually, in my opinion, a lot of truth to these allegations. And people who were making the allegations and the accusations did provide receipts, whereas Jeff and Shaleia are only providing these sort of vague, somewhat spiritual sounding, like these incredibly vague allusions and statements, and hoping that that's going to be enough to, to tamp down the bad publicity.
End of the day, we still have respect for those people because of what they chose to endeavor into. And we know how hard it was.
Remember this, that he says they actually have respect for these students, and then listen to how he goes on to talk about them. It's the bait and switch that these people do. It's the manipulation, saying, "Oh yes, we respect them. We love them. We respect them." And now we're just going to trash talk them.
And it's totally okay that they didn't want to continue. And we also have enormous respect for individual sovereignty and freedom of choice, which hilariously, media tried to say the opposite. Most of what they said about us was literally the opposite.
The thing is, brainwashing and cults circumvent individual sovereignty and freedom of choice. And that's the sad part. That's the ironic part of what they're saying. They're saying they have enormous respect for people's choice, people's right to choose, people's individual sovereignty. Um, and it's interesting because that term, individual sovereignty, is actually something that a very popular and fantastic YouTube channel called Cults to Consciousness. She uses that term, individual sovereignty, in her intro to all her videos, and it makes me wonder whether Jeff and Shaleia watch that YouTube channel. I bet you they do. But the whole thing with cults is that they try to circumvent this whole idea of individual sovereignty and choice. And they do that through the mind control that they exert on their members. They take away the members' ability to choose and to act in their own best interests via these coercive controlling methods that they use. They exercise a lot of control over the members. It's very manipulative, and that necessarily interferes with a person's right to decide what they want to do and what's best for them. And so it can take years to extricate yourself from one of these groups, even if you realize that what is going on is harmful. And even the people who are speaking out about Twin Flames universe, many of them stayed in for years, even long after they could see the red flags. They continued to stay in the group. So this whole argument that Jeff is saying, well, they just didn't want to put in the work and they just didn't do the hard spiritual work, is just completely inaccurate. And I am going to be here pointing out the inaccuracies in what he's saying.
Enormous respect for autonomy and sovereignty and freedom of choice.
Mm-hmm.
So as you go through this work and you uncover these uncomfortable parts of your consciousness, of your psyche, of your emotional body, it comes up to the surface to be healed and released. And as Twin Flame spiritual guru, we were helping students do that on an individual basis at the pace they were asking.
This makes me so cross because, whilst, yes, I agree, when you're doing self reflection and you're trying to engage in your own healing work, things do come up to the surface, and someone who is skilled and properly credentialed, someone who has the expertise, can assist you in healing whatever has come up to the surface. Jeff and Shaleia, however, took people who were in that vulnerable state and exploited them, exploited their labor, verbally abused them, tried to coerce them to make certain extremely personal decisions about things like their gender and who they should be in a relationship with. And they actually have the audacity to sit here and say that they have tremendous respect for individual sovereignty and freedom of choice and all this sort of thing. Just makes me so cross.
This was new, not just to us, but to literally planet Earth. No one else was doing what we were doing ever.
Remember earlier in the video how they said the twin flames has been around for thousands of years in all these different religions, Christianity and Islam and Hinduism, and that everyone was, and that suddenly there was a cultural movement about twin flames and everyone was talking about it. But now they're saying, well, their work was so new. No one had ever done this before and it was new to planet Earth. It's just the contradictions make my head spin.
What? This was new, not just to us, but to literally planet Earth. No one else was doing what we were doing ever. This was experimental and exploratory, and it wasn't a Jeff and Shaleia do as we say, as the media likes to portray it.
Yeah, I know.
This was a collaborative endeavor that we as a community endeavored to together. Always was, still is, always will be.
Right. So did members have the right to push back on anything? If it was truly collaborative, then members would have had the right to push back on things that Jeff and Shaleia were saying. But when you have this unequal power dynamic, those at the top never take kindly to criticism. They'll try to present it as if it's collaborative, as if it's, there is this degree of equality. But where the rubber really meets the road with equality and collaboration is what happens when you disagree. What happens when people don't like the things that you're saying? What happens when you are stepping out of line and people say, hang on, I'm not comfortable with that? That's when you really see what your so-called collaboration and equality is worth.
Collaboration. Hey, this is what I feel. This is what you feel. This is what we agreed to. This is the relationship that's working. Let's keep going. And
pretty clear, I think, that Jeff exerted pressure on people to agree with whatever he had come up with. I would be very interested to know how often it actually happened that Jeff came in with a particular suggestion and that he was actually convinced to accept other people's, other people's ideas. How often did that actually happen? Because to me, what I see when I look at Twin Flames Universe and what I see when I look at these two is two people who are intent on getting their own way and who don't have respect for other people or other people's opinions, other people's ideas. I think we've seen countless examples of that in this video. In this video alone.
collaboration. Hey, this is what I feel. This is what you feel. This is what we agreed to. This is the relationship that's working. Let's keep going. And we check in all the way along. Hey, is this still working for you? There's a wide open door that says, if this isn't working, if there's a real problem or grievance here, let's discuss it. And
well, that may be true. Maybe people could discuss things with them, but I very much doubt that anything other than Jeff and Shaleia's way ever prevailed. I've had bosses like this before. Bosses, you could get a particularly authoritarian boss who would say, oh, my door is always wide open. You can come to me if you have a concern or a question or a grievance, you can come to me anytime. And technically that may have been true. The door might have always been open and maybe technically you were always able to speak to them. But when you do try and speak to them, you're belittled, you're shouted down, you're manipulated, you're made to feel silly, and you're made to feel like you're wrong for questioning them. And ultimately, you're always just talked back around to doing exactly what they want. They have no respect for your opinion or your ideas or your feelings. They just are interested in exerting pressure and control. Ultimately, at the end of the day, they have their own, you know, way that they want things to go. And that is what is going to prevail no matter what. No matter how much you might try to protest or question, or no matter how much of an open door policy they might have, if at the end of the day, no one else's way other than the leader actually ever ends up happening, then your open door policy really doesn't mean anything.
Students who left did bring their grievances forth. But it was never the community is doing something wrong thing, or Jeff and Shaleia, there's something wrong here. The conclusion we repeatedly came to was, hey, this is just your inner work. Why not try doing that?
You see, that's exactly kind of like what I was saying. People can bring their concerns to you, but if you, as an authoritarian leader, as a kind of a cult leader, as a very bad leader, if if you're not willing to accept criticism, if you're not willing to actually change course and do things differently, if you have such a massive ego that you can't tolerate being questioned or allowing someone else their own ideas, allowing someone else to have influence, then you, as a toxic leader, are automatically going to come to the conclusion or are going to express to the other person that they are the problem. It's just their inner work that they need to do. They're just not doing the work. It's not us. It's not the group that's the problem. It's not our organization that's the problem. It's you. You just have some things that you need to work on an individual level. This is it's a dead giveaway of a totalitarian high control group.
Very often the response was okay, but the reality was, I don't really want to do my inner work. I don't really want to do this.
You see the way he sneers when he says that? Although he says he has respect and compassion for these people, that sneer gives away how he really feels. He is trying to paint them as petulant and lazy, people who just didn't want to do the work. They were the problem. The group wasn't the problem. He and Shaleia were not the problem. It was the students who were the problem, and they just didn't want to fix the problem, which was themselves. And again, it's that sneering, it's that contempt that comes through, which shows you how he actually feels about these people.
I don't like going in my own consciousness. I really, really like the community and the love and the attention and the prosperity, the wealth that I get, the respect, the authority, everything that comes part of being intimately involved with Twin Flames universe.
Intimately involved in a cult. So all of these things, these positive benefits that he's talking about, the community, potentially financial success, authority, respect, friendships, these are very common bait, or it's that almost sunk cost fallacy, or I'm struggling to think of the correct term for it, but it's these hooks that keep people in a cult. So there are multiple factors that keep people engaged in a cult. The coercive control, the mind control, the brainwashing, indoctrination, that's just one aspect of it. That's the sort of the on the negative side. But on the sort of positive reinforcement side, you've also got these various benefits that people do get from being in the cult, particularly the relationships, and maybe a sense of being important, maybe a sense of being valued, like being valuable, or doing something valuable. I'm sure that Jeff and Shaleia portrayed the work as they're doing something really important for humanity. He talked about, oh, nothing like this had ever been done before on planet Earth. We were doing something really groundbreaking. And I'm sure people in the group felt that. They felt like they were a part of a mission that was bigger than themselves. And when you believe that, when you have been indoctrinated to believe that, it is very hard to walk away from. And if you have been in the group for a long time, you've spent a lot of money, you've worked your way up the hierarchy a little bit, and you feel like you have a position of some sort of importance, that is very hard to walk away from. But that doesn't mean that the group is a good thing. Cults do this to people. They keep people in through multiple layers of control.
Feels good. But often they didn't want to do the thing that produced the result. And so naturally they would leave. But
He's contradicting himself here. On the one hand, he's saying people didn't want to give up the friendships, the relationships, the money that they might have been earning, the community, the sense of, being important or having authority. But he said then, on the other hand, they didn't want to do the work, and so naturally they would leave. So were the good things not really that good after all? It's like he can't keep his story straight. He can't make a coherent argument about why people are leaving. He has to just insult them. He has to say, well, you know, people, it was difficult, so people walked away. But he's just got done explaining how people got all these benefits from being in the community. So how does it make sense that it was easy for people to walk away?
that can be really hard to leave behind.
Yeah. It's like,
So on the one hand, they didn't want to do the work because I'm just recapping what Jeff is saying here and just pointing out how his arguments don't make sense. On the one hand, he's saying they didn't want to do the spiritual work or the work on themselves because it was too hard. But also it was very hard to leave behind the community. So which is it, Jeff? Was it easy for people to leave or was it hard for people to leave?
Another thing is that can be really hard to leave behind.
yeah. It's like leaving family behind, which is another thing we'll quickly get into later.
We will, because it's really sweet
It's really
inside
sweet
the walls of Twin Flames universe.
The love bombing. And again, I can't help but draw comparisons to Nexium. People who found Nexium to be such a difficult cult to leave because of the community, because there was this very strong sense of camaraderie and friendship and these, bonds, even within that slave component of Nexium, the DOS group of, the master slave um, mini cult within Nexium. Even within that group, there were these strong bonds of friendship between people, or what people believed were strong bonds of friendship. Because in a cult, these are all conditional relationships, they're not real. It's very, very conditional love. And as soon as you leave the group, you see how quickly those relationships change or just stop. They stop existing altogether, because it's only when you're inside the cult bubble that you feel that sense of love. And the minute you leave, then you feel the wrath, the coldness of being on the outside of the group.
Boundary will, because it's really sweet
It's really
inside the walls of Twin Flames universe. And I say walls because there is a boundary, and you have to earn trust to get closer, just like you would in any community. That's a normal, healthy relationship. And that's ingrained into the culture of our community.
I would argue that what they call trust, I would call that you're working to earn the approval of the leaders. You're working to demonstrate that you are willing to make sacrifices, inappropriate sacrifices, for the group. In order to be part of the group, you're demonstrating how compliant you are. That's my reading of that. I don't read that as real trust, because for me, real trust is based on a relationship of equality. real trust is based on a relationship of respect. And I don't believe that Jeff and Shaleia have respect for the members of their group. I don't believe they have respect for their students. I think what they call trust, I would call compliance.
That's a normal, healthy relationship. And that's ingrained into the culture of our community, the teaching itself that gets you into harmonious union. Totally get it. New cutting edge spirituality, new cutting edge consciousness around community, new cutting edge consciousness around culture.
Hate to point this out to you, Jeff, but nothing that you're doing is particularly cutting edge. The whole concept of community that's been done by cults going back probably hundreds of years at this point. We've seen that many, many times before with other groups, with even with spiritual communities that aren't cults. You know, the whole concept of community, but certainly other cults have done exactly what Twin Flames Universe is doing. There's nothing new under the sun with these cults, even though they like to claim that they are so new and so cutting edge. Nexium did the exact same thing. Keith Raniere claimed that he was such an innovator, that he had developed all this new technology. None of it was new. All of it was plagiarized, just like Jeff and Shaleia's materials are mostly plagiarized. Even the whole concept of the mirror exercise, which is their sort of key teaching, that's heavily borrowed from, spiritual concepts like the law of attraction, theories like manifestation. None of that I support. I think it's very harmful and nonsense, and I could go on and on about all of that for ages, but I won't. But I just want to point out nothing that they are saying about their group is particularly new or different. Other cults have done this, but it serves them to make it seem like, oh, we had this really amazing thing that people wanted to be a part of, and you have to work to earn your place. This is very, very culty language.
Super cutting edge um, consciousness around community, new cutting edge consciousness around culture. Everything we're doing is super cutting edge. Even the way that we structure financially is really unusual and cutting edge and pushing the envelope.
Unusual, cutting edge, pushing the envelope. None of these necessarily mean that these are good things, though. None of these aren't inherently positive, though. I just do feel the need to point out.
Honestly, that's where we like to be, is on the cutting edge. That's where we feel most comfortable,
We
most
like
happy.
to be in the future, you know.
That's where we live.
I don't really feel like we're from these times. I feel like we're from the future, but and we're here and we're bringing the future
The distant
with
future,
us.
the year 2000, the distant future. You hear that song from
Yeah, because like most people,
Flight of the Conchords.
most people in the world, they aren't living in the same way that we are.
No.
They're not they're not with their twin flame, or they're not they're not doing this as a spiritual ascension path. Like they're on a soulmate journey. They're on a different path. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, it's just different.
Not ready for their ascension
Not
journey.
ready.
Don't know if it's so much not being ready as most people just see this as the bullshit that it is, because there is absolutely nothing concrete to support the idea that the whole idea of twin flames is real. You can believe in it, of course, that is your right, and there are people, obviously many people who do believe in this idea, and I respect their right to believe that. But I just think it would be remiss of me to not point out that it's not necessarily that people are not ready for the whole twin flame ascension path. It's just people don't think, people don't see the value in it because there is just simply no evidence to support it. Why would they? Why would people pursue a so-called ascension path when it just seems like nonsense to them?
But like, I'm
Mm.
here for the people that do want it, and I'm here for the people for like, the 25th century
So to kind
that will
of
get
lay
this.
this final piece to rest here, ultimately, like, we want for you to do what you want.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And we want for us to do what we want, so long as there's no harm going on.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, there's never been any harm proven by anyone.
Well, that's just a lie. I mean, that's a fabrication. There are just example upon example upon example of people who have experienced provable harm. And it's really audacious for him to just outright claim that none of that harm exists. But I suppose they're desperate at this point. They have no real defense to offer. And so all they can really do at this point is just lie and deny. Deny, attack, reverse victim offender, Davo. It's the tried and tested and predictable response from abusive people. When in doubt, just deny and lie, I suppose.
Stories taken out
Mm-hmm.
of context, manipulated for profit, and
Right.
fed to you as a sensational lie to get your attention
Right.
at the expense of the truth.
Yeah.
And for those of you who want drama, I promised you weren't going to get any
You're not
here.
gonna get it
If
here.
you were looking for drama, you might as well walk away. Sorry, it's not here.
I'm sure they would have walked away like an hour
I
ago.
think that the most sensational and compelling story here is the truth. I think the truth is always the most
Oh,
compelling
so
story
juicy.
by far.
I know.
And that's what we pitched to the media in totality with our whole hearts twice with Vanity Fair and CTV, and that they threw away completely. So,
Again, I just feel the need to point out the CTV documentary featured lengthy portions of an interview with Jeff and Shaleia where the words were coming out of Jeff and Shalea's own mouth. The interviewer was very respectful. She was very gracious. She didn't try to twist the facts in any way. It was just very straightforward questions that were posed to Jeff and Shaleia. And Jeff and Shaleia, in their typical fashion, just offered very vague statements and no real defense to the accusations. So if they came out looking poorly in that documentary, I mean, they only have themselves to blame.
our own story in our own way. Hope you're enjoying it. Um, you can leave if you want to.
Thanks for giving me permission, Jeff. I wasn't aware that I needed it.
Our own story in our own way. Hope you're enjoying it. Um, you can leave if you want to. So I feel pretty good about addressing the former student thing.
Yeah.
I feel pretty good about addressing our finances. Like, we create value for people, they will like it, and so they pay us for it, and they don't have to if they don't want to.
It's basic economics.
And there's free stuff, there's cheap stuff, and there's premium stuff that's super valuable. That, I actually got a statistic from Twin Flame Ascension School is, people who are watching TFAS actively last week watched on average 4.5 hours per person per
Pretty
week,
cool.
right? And this is something you get for life once it's paid for. Not even Netflix do you do that. So, and
I'm sorry, what? They watched 4.5 hours per person per week, and they're saying not even Netflix does that. Are they not aware that Netflix has a lot of content that you can watch for 4.5 hours or 10.5 hours or 50 hours per week if you so choose? I mean, like, I'm not I don't know what they're trying to do with this argument. Are they saying because they sell the courses to people and people have access to it for the rest of their lives because they've bought the course, that that's somehow a revolutionary concept? Help me understand. I don't what are you saying? What is so different or revolutionary about what you're doing? It's exactly the same as if I were to buy an audiobook or um, purchase a film from Amazon that if I watch it, if I purchase a box set of series, it's the exact same. I don't understand what they're saying is so different about what they're doing.
My students who week,
Cool.
right? And this is something you get for life once it's paid for. Not
That's how purchases work. You buy it and then it's yours to keep. I don't understand.
that. So, and people tell me, my students who have harmonious union years, 5, 6 years later after they bought TFAS, got everything, still watch it. Still.
That's because indoctrination needs to be continuously reinforced. Otherwise, it stops working. That's why cults like Scientology require you to continuously come into the organization and do more courses and keep paying for more levels on that bridge to total freedom that Scientology has. They require you to continuously come in and get auditing, and they need you to keep staying engaged with the material. Otherwise, the indoctrination fades. And it's very sad because every cult works like this. It needs to keep members close, it needs to keep members continuously consuming the material in order to keep the indoctrination fresh in people's minds, because as soon as you get distance from the content, the indoctrination starts to fade and your critical thinking and your authentic self starts to come through. And I can comment on this because I see it as being quite similar to when I was in the whole world of feminine energy dating advice, which I have talked about many times before. I had to continuously consume the content. I had to constantly watch videos from these feminine energy dating coaches in order to keep it fresh in my mind, because the content doesn't really make sense on its own. It's not giving you actual, like a legitimate way to continue to live your life, because once you start to remove yourself from it, it starts to unravel. And so if you are intent on keeping it going, if you want to keep the cult's personality fresh, and you want to stay connected, you have to continuously keep re-indoctrinating yourself. That's also why MLMs make their members continuously attend conferences and in-person events or team trainings. It's to continuously re-indoctrinate people. Um, and now I'm repeating myself. But again, it's so that the indoctrination doesn't unravel. And I bet you if we really looked into the Twin Flames universe teachings, you would find them and maybe their coaches as well saying things like you need to keep revisiting the materials over and over and over again. Even if you've done the courses once, keep going back to the material and keep rewatching it. I bet you they're encouraging their students to do that. I would bet dollars to donuts that that's what's happening.
Me, my students who have harmonious union years, 5, 6 years later after they bought TFAS, got everything, still watch it. Still super valuable.
So I don't think this is the flex that he thinks it is. It's not the flex that he wants it to be. If the material was really that good, if it actually provided people with skills that they could learn and take into their relationships, why would they have to keep coming back and watching hours and hours and hours, hours upon hours of material over and over again? To me, this doesn't sound like just brushing up on certain skills. To me, this sounds like re-indoctrination. I mean, that's just what it sounds like to me. Let me know what you think.
How valuable this stuff is.
Yeah.
And we charge very low for what the reality of what you get is. And everyone says that who gets
Thousands and thousands and thousands for their courses. So that in terms of whether that's a low price, that might be open to interpretation. But I would submit that's not very low. I would say thousands and thousands of dollars is a lot of money.
finance is good. former students good?
Especially like when you know, you meet your twin flame and shit starts getting real, then you're like
Oh yeah.
really grateful that you have TFAS
Oh yeah.
and or an ascension coach as well,
And a relationship with the
and a
community,
relationship with
which
the
is free, by the way.
community.
You don't have to pay for it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So that you
So
feel
Are they suggesting that that they would or should be able to monetize your relationships with other members of the community and that they're being so generous that they're not doing that? Is that what they're saying? Oh, the relationships with the community is free. Well, what else would it be? Are you going to try and make people pay for their friendships and relationships as well?
kind of like mentally
yeah.
cataloging here, like why us, good, what is our position on the media, having been dragged through it for 5 years. I think you're pretty clear on that. I wanted to address the former family member thing.
Yeah, let's
So
do
we
that
kind of
briefly.
touched on it. Did you want to lead here, or did you want me to lead?
Well, you know, I just feel like, for one, I just want to say, I have compassion for these, you know, family members, and I'm not just saying it. It's not a cop out. It's how I genuinely feel.
Mm-hmm.
I understand I'm estranged from my family,
Yeah, me too.
and so is Jeff, and it's
Super
it
difficult.
was an extremely painful experience.
I'm estranged from, you know, parts of my family. And so I don't want to comment on Jeff and Shalea's relationships with their families and their parents. And I don't want to take away from any pain that they may be feeling around this issue. It's an extremely difficult thing to be estranged from your family and to make that decision. And so I don't really want to offer my opinion or weigh in on that. I just do find it a little bit concerning that Jeff and Shalia seem to have become estranged from their families at around the same time. And it makes me question, they both became estranged from their families around the time that they started getting into doing this twin flames work. I hesitate to call it that, but just for want of a better word. And so that just makes me concerned about whether this was actually a truly individual decision that each of them arrived at on their own, or whether there was some sort of pressure from each other to do this. Well, you're estranged from I'm estranged from my family, so you should be estranged from yours. I just question how healthy this decision really, like whether they arrived at it from a very healthy and empowered place. Um, that's the only thing I'll say about that. I find the timing of it interesting. Um, and I just hope that they received proper support, preferably from mental health professionals, and proper guidance on becoming estranged from your family. And I just hope that it was the right decision. I'll just put it that way.
I ever thought I'd go through or ever wanted to go through.
Mm.
But it did happen mostly because we had a clear clash in our value system.
Mm-hmm.
And I no longer fit within my former family system. And it was no longer compassionate for me to be in that family and for my family members to be around me. And they will agree with that, actually.
Mm-hmm.
They are glad that I'm not in the family anymore.
Well, that's probably the ideal situation that both sides, if you are estranged from your family, it's ideal that both sides are at peace with that. I think that's probably the best thing that you can hope for, that you are at peace with the decision and that your family is also at peace with that. I think, sadly, far too many people are not in that position and don't have that. So if that is true, that her family are at peace with it and she is at peace with it, then I'm genuinely glad. I really am, for her and for her family, if that is how they feel.
A lot of pain and suffering because I was awakening into my spiritual journey, and they didn't understand it. They didn't agree with it. They didn't like who I was changing and who I was becoming into. and my values started to change.
They didn't want any of this for
They
themselves
didn't
either.
want it for themselves. And it's,
It's okay.
it's not to say, oh, I'm not telling you what you want and what you don't want. I just want to address what I see as the elephant in the room. And so, yeah, first off, I understand your pain. I'm sorry for it. But secondly, we have never, ever in our life told someone in our community that they need to leave their family. That is a very personal and that's a very private decision.
Well, if their statements about other things, which, they've lied several times in this video, if their statements about other things are anything to go by, I don't believe that. They also claim that they didn't pressure anyone to change their gender and that that's also a personal decision. And I agree, it is a very personal decision that other people should not be involved in, aside from your therapist. And so I just have a hard time believing Jeff and Shaleia, plain and simple. When they say they didn't pressurize people or tell people to cut their families off, I just have a very hard time believing that.
Not something that we ever take lightly when a community member writes a post about it and says
Super rare, by the way.
super rare, by the way. It almost never happens. And so when someone does decide to leave,
Usually, the story is we feel so much closer to our family.
and not only that, we've saved families. By the way, there were some members that were like, "I'm so mad at my mom. I'm never going to talk to her again," or my dad, like, "I'm leaving my family." And we're like, "Whoa, whoa,
Don't want to do that.
let's just think about it. Is there love there? Or is this just an upset? Can you work through this with your family? Or is this really completely, like, is this irreconcilable relationship?
I just again want to point out Jeff and Shaleia are not qualified to do that. They're not family counselors. They're not qualified to help people navigate their family relationships. It's a very serious, very sensitive thing, that requires a lot of expertise, and there are layers to it. Yes. And it's honestly, it's best worked through with someone who has a real and professional understanding of childhood abuse and trauma and family dynamics. And it really is way out of Jeff and Shaleia's scope of practice. They're way out of their depth if they are trying to advise people on stuff like that.
Abuse.
Furthermore, we're just two people on the internet, so like you're not gonna leave your family over us.
Right.
And even if you
So when it suits them, they're gurus and experts, and they're qualified to help people with their trauma, and they're healing people's trauma, and they're healing people's relationships, and they're providing family counseling and relationship counseling, and they're these, enlightened beings who are helping hundreds and thousands of people. When it suits them, that's their narrative. But when it suits them at different times, no, they're just two people on the internet. Why would anyone leave their families for us? We're just two people on the internet. The contradictions make my head spin. I think I've already said that, but honestly, with these two, it's a wild ride. A really, really wild ride.
can always just go back to them.
Is there abuse?
Furthermore, we're just two people on the internet, so like you're not gonna leave your family over us.
Right.
And even if you do, you can always just go back to them. Like
Oh, is it just that simple? Well, you leave your family, you can just go back to your family. He's so flippant about it. The way that he's so flippant about this. Oh, well, if you burn bridges with your family, if you destroy those relationships, you can always just go back. I mean, what's the big deal? Like, what's everyone getting their knickers in a knot about? Oh, he's so awful.
let's repair it.
Sorry.
Okay, you're my son. I'm happy to repair it.
Exactly.
This has
How can you be so sure about that? I mean, you encourage people, if you encourage people to break contact with their families, it might not be so simple as just going back to those relationships. You can't take that for granted. It's such an irresponsible thing for them to have said.
grievances. So first of all, The grievances that you have with your family members have nothing to do with us. And I'm talking to literally everyone.
But Shaleia just said that her grievances with her family did have to do with this twin flames work, this spiritual work, that their values no longer aligned. Her family didn't want to do the spiritual work. And so they didn't like who she was becoming. And that was what caused her to become estranged from her family. But now Jeff is saying, oh, well, that can't be true for our students. That, that if our students become estranged from their families, that's nothing to do with us. Well, why can it be true for Shaleia, but not true for your students?
Your grievances and your relationships in your life have everything to do with you in your relationships. You are in complete control over your choices. No one else is.
He's acting like coercive control and manipulation and indoctrination don't exist. And of course, it's convenient for them to pretend that they don't exist. Because if you deny that these are real phenomena, then you don't have to take responsibility.
Think otherwise. So, while we have enormous compassion for the situation, we're not your problem. You're your own problem. And if you prefer to blame it on someone, I'm sure the Netflix, character they created using me and my community is a really good scapegoat to place your feelings upon.
What did I tell you? Deny, attack, reverse victim offender. He and Shaleia are the real victims here. If you think you're a victim, you're just mistaken. You are actually the problem. He and Shaleia are actually the real victims.
At your content. Character they created using me and my community is a really good scapegoat to place your feelings upon. Go do so at your content. Has nothing to do with me.
Right. Also, I don't know, there's a lot of support groups out there for parents who have children that are transgender or LGBTQ. You're not alone in feeling upset about a child, or really it's an adult child.
They're complaining about 30, 40 or
I
plus year
know,
old
these
children.
are literal adults, this
Yeah.
isn't a minor.
I didn't necessarily see from the parents that they were complaining about their children being transgender. I mean, I know that even in this day and age, there are plenty of parents who struggle with that, who struggle if their children come out as transgender or as LGBTQ. Um, I'm not I'm not minimizing that, but I'm sure some of the parents that were parents of people within Twin Flames universe who changed their gender, I'm sure some of it was difficulty in dealing with the concept of their child being transgender, but I didn't see that as being the main concern that people had. The main concern that was expressed from the parents, the way I saw it, was that these were not choices that their children arrived at on their own, that they were pressured and coercively controlled and manipulated to make those choices. That was primarily the problem that the parents had. It was that they didn't believe that their children would have transitioned if it had not been for Jeff and Shaleia's influence.
Which would be a totally different story. But yeah, we have nothing to do with that. But there are support groups out there for parents that have transgender, LGBTQ children, adult children, or children. And there's a lot of resources out there for you. Definitely encourage looking into them. That might be something you could be interested in. If not, hey, that's cool. But I have nothing to do with your family member.
That's between you and your.
They say they have nothing to do with it when these gender transitions happened whilst their children were inside Twin Flames universe. And Jeff and Shaleia are just so cavalierly and so blithely distancing themselves, like, oh, that has nothing to do with us. Oh, these two are so reprehensible. They really are.
Family member,
And I think
that's it.
the only real conclusion you came to is we had a relationship before, and then they come and enter into Jeff and Shaleia's world, and now they no longer have a relationship with me.
Sure. Logical
Um,
conclusion to draw.
sure, that's the
Well, because that happens a lot in cults. Family estrangement is a key feature of a lot of cults. And this is why families get concerned, because they see that their family member has become involved with a particular group, and all of a sudden their family member is distancing themselves from the family. And it would be different if it was a completely empowered and individual decision that that family member came to cut themselves off. The concern comes with the cult influence, the undue influence exerted by the cult, and so many cults do this, and that's why people get concerned.
but
You have
that
to erase a whole piece of what, yeah, as far as I understood, they communicated to you repeatedly.
well, I think you're not listening to your adult child, and I think you would need to start there of like, what are they actually saying if you really want to repair the
I don't think
relationship.
that they really want to repair the
But I don't
relationship.
think so.
That's not my sense that I
It's
got from
not,
the
but like
situation from my
they
limited
just want to
perspective.
blame us.
And who are you to say what the family members actually want to do? You know, again, this is just more mudslinging. If Jeff and Shaleia can't succeed in producing coherent, logical arguments and defenses to the accusations, they just resort to slinging mud. Oh, well, those family members just didn't want to repair the relationships. How do you know?
Hey, to
Easy to
each
do.
their own. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel
God
pretty
bless.
complete on that. Is there anything else you want to say on that subject?
Oh no, we're good. Yeah.
So I don't want to dwell on this,
No.
and that's another reason we didn't like speak up. This has nothing to do with us. This has everything to do
No.
with the media and culture. Not our turn to talk, but it is becoming our turn to talk again. And we're not here to talk about cults and a drama and nonsense.
It's convenient, isn't it? That they don't want to look at things like the bite model, like Rick Allen Ross's, key definitions of a cult, key features of a cult. Jeff and Shaleia are not going to talk about that because they can't easily refute those accusations. They can't really easily refute any of the accusations. And so they'll just be like, oh, well, we don't want to talk about cults. But cults cause real harm, and cults all exhibit similar characteristics. And so it's kind of convenient that Jeff and Shaleia don't want to address the whole issue of cults because of just how many similarities their group has to some very dangerous cults that we've seen. As I've said, I personally see a lot of similarities between Twin Flames Universe and Nexium. And I could probably do a whole video on that, and I might do that, maybe a little bit down the line. I'll do a video just describing the parallels between Twin Flames Universe and some high profile cults like Scientology and Nexium.
Here to talk about is twin flames and spiritual ascension, God and unionism, and personal development, self-development. And that includes growing your wealth, which is the reason we share our wealth on the internet. Hey, I got this awesome Chanel bag. It represents me serving people with my spirituality and getting results for them with it. It's me.
No, it represents how much you paid for your Chanel bag. Just this, oh, I hate it when these influencer coach type people talk like this. Oh, look at my lavish lifestyle. Look at this expensive designer bag that I bought. It represents how I've helped people. No, it represents a monetary value that you paid for it. And someone else who had, money from some other thing could buy the exact same Chanel bag for the same price that you paid for it. It has nothing to do whatsoever with spiritual. There's nothing spiritual about a Chanel bag. Let's get serious here. Let's stay ground. I know that you guys are spiritual teachers, but let's just try to have our feet planted on planet Earth for a moment.
This awesome Chanel bag. It represents me serving people with my spirituality and getting results for them with it. it's me living my purpose that God placed into my heart, and when I followed it, I became prosperous doing it, rather than me being afraid, following some formula of the system, doing everything right, and bleeding for a chance at it. It's not the way, folks. We're teaching you how to create real spiritual wealth that also attracts material wealth too.
Funny because a lot of your former students invested years into your so called teachings and they didn't experience that.
How to do real spiritual work. We offer real relationship, real spiritual community. You don't have to do this work alone. We're all collaborating on it together, Shaleia and I included. We just talked about, Shaleia and I discovered that we're both neurodivergent in our own way. Like, that's what I want to talk about.
That's what I want to talk about too.
I want to
Among
talk
other
about
things, twin
the
flames.
cutting edge of our spiritual development with you, like we used to before all this drama.
It's so interesting the way that these two will latch onto actual research-based science when it suits them, and then they'll intersperse it with their own, spiritual kind of hogwash. Like, look, if they are neurodivergent and they've just discovered this about themselves and it helps them, I think that's wonderful. I know certainly when I discovered that I was neurodivergent, it greatly increased my understanding of myself and my compassion for myself. But I just don't like it when actual science based, research based concepts are co opted by groups like this who are actually causing a lot of harm to people because of their unsubstantiated teachings. They're entering into the realm of psychology when they don't have the expertise and skills and credentials to do so. And but using the language of neurodivergence, people might be fooled into thinking that Jeff and Shalia can help them with this. And that makes me concerned. Are they going to start preying on neurodivergent people now? I really, that makes me really sad to think that they might start doing that, but I wouldn't put it past them.
Doing that. We haven't stopped all the way along. If you check our
I'd love to
Instagram, we
talk
keep
about.
growing.
I'd love to talk about family too, because we're, we got a 2-year-old, and we're enmeshed in family life, and we have a lot of insights.
Interesting that she uses that word, enmeshed. Very interesting. Wonder if that was a Freudian slip.
Thoughts on that. There's so much we want to share about our life, and that's what we're going to do with our podcast. Yes, this is an official podcast. We had an unofficial one in our Facebook group. That was cool. But yeah, like, this is kind of the direction that we're going in, is we're going to be doing podcasts, and we are going to be going back to our roots, going back to what we love to do, going back to what we're really good at.
Spiritual work.
And we're here to serve you and to serve your twin flame ascension journey and your healing journey. And that is what brings us so much joy. And this is the direction that we're now headed in. And we're so grateful for you for coming along with us.
We're not going to stop. That superstorm did not stop us.
No.
We only grew strong.
That superstorm, if that's what he wants to call it, I really think is only getting started now with the investigations that various government agencies are undertaking into Twin Flames universe. I think their troubles are only just beginning, in my opinion. I think this concept that they have, that they're just going to keep going as normal ad infinitum, is quite delusional. As I say, I think my personal opinion is that it's only a matter of time before the authorities close in on these two and on this group, and they get shut down altogether. Or at worst case scenario, I think they'll just become a very, very fringe group that's is not attracting people in large numbers. It'll just become this very sort of devoted core, group of diehards. But I'm really hopeful, as I've said numerous times, that these government investigations will lead to something and will lead to this group being shut down eventually.
our character developed, our
Yeah.
community,
It was an
culture
it
developed.
was an interesting arc in our story.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's continuing, and I think that the next podcast we do is going to be about our origin stories. You know, why is it that we call ourselves twin flame spiritual gurus?
Yeah.
Guru,
How did
not
that
spiritual
happen?
teacher. That was a thing. Our Indian students brought us that title. We
Well,
didn't bestow it
we
upon
don't want to
ourselves.
spoil the story. Some people already know, but we'll get
We'll
into
get
it.
into the next
Yeah,
podcast,
in the
but
next one, yeah.
I just want to say, like, also, like, we're going to talk about MAP, the mind alignment process, the actual um, healing that we do, that we developed, pulled out of Twin Flame Ascension School, and turned into a specific process that can be applied.
With absolutely no credentials or expertise or, you know, basis in actual psychological research. They actually work on people who have significant trauma using this MAP process. And this is actually one of the facets of Twin Flames universe that the government is investigating, because I think it's potentially one of the most harmful parts of this group. It's headed up by this woman, Dr. Christine Emmerich. Don't let the doctor title fool you. I mean, I know you probably already know this if you've seen the documentaries. She's not a doctor in psychology or in medicine, or she has no qualifications to do this sort of work at all. She's an ex army or military person, and her doctorate or her PhD is in, oh, I forget what it is, but it's something that has absolutely nothing to do. It's like um, public service or something like that. It's got nothing to do with any sort of expertise to help people with trauma. So I would be um, just delighted just to see the MAP part of Twin Flames universe being shut down. Very, very harmful.
Trauma healing.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been doing this for years, and the results are astounding. And this is part of the
Mm-hmm.
reason why this drama from the media, this exploitation, has been so heartbreaking, because people are literally dying from trauma.
I agree that it's been heartbreaking, but it really bothers me to see them continuously refer to it as drama and exploitation, as if they are the ones being exploited, when it's actually people who have trauma. And I agree, there are people who are, dying from trauma, who do need help. But Jeff and Shaleia are sure as hell not the ones to provide that help. That's for sure.
Families are ripped apart, and it's resolvable, like, relatively easily at scale. And we have
I mean, just the mere fact that they say that it's easy to resolve trauma should be a giant blaring alarm bell for anyone who is considering listening to these two.
data to prove it. And if you call us a cult and psycho cult leaders, you're going to write off any of the results we get as quackery. But
Because it is quackery.
mind alignment process, mindalignmentprocess.org, go to if you can check it out, is the most effective trauma healing modality on the planet today. People are healing of
Citation needed. What data or sources or statistics or like really anything? What sources do you have to back up that statement, Jeff? Again, these two will just lie and exaggerate with a straight face. They have no problem making outrageous statements like this.
and PTSD. And these are medical professionals who are. Why'd you poke me?
Oh, nothing.
What were you trying to communicate?
No,
Okay.
nothing. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Sorry, just
I am
sensitive.
getting tired though. So.
Okay.
Ooh, see, she is not a very nice person. She poked him, like she's getting tired, so she poked him. That's not very nice, Shaleia. Jeez. I thought you guys were supposed to be twin flames, like so in sync with one another. Here she's poking and prodding him to get him to shut up.
wrapping it up, but I don't want
Let me finish what I'm saying and we'll
Okay.
wrap it up. Who healed their PTSD and their trauma. Huge success. 90+% of people
Citation needed.
completely healed their trauma through the
Citation needed.
mind alignment process. And this is just one of the things that have been suppressed by this media sickening junk. So the wife says it's time to wrap up.
Yeah.
I guess it's time to wrap up. Thank you so
guys.
much for joining us. The comment section is open for those of you who want constructive things to say.
In other words, those of you who want to blow smoke up our ass and agree with us.
And thank you so
guys.
much for joining us. The comment section is open for those of you who want constructive things to say. I'm sure that we'll get some trolls, and if you don't have anything constructive to say, I'm going to delete your comment. Big surprise there. And you're going to complain and say you delete comment. I'm going to delete that too.
No, we foster,
Constructive comments only.
Constructive.
I thought you guys were so enlightened. You guys were so self-aware. You were open to feedback. And here he's saying outright he's going to delete comments that are critical or not constructive, but I think we all know what that means. I mean, it's not a surprise. These two are not fooling anyone into thinking that they are actually, aware enough and humble enough to accept criticism. But it's just kind of incredible that he's just being so forthright about it.
Healthy, communication.
You can disagree and be
Sure.
constructive. We'll allow that.
We'll allow
If
that.
you're just to dump hate, we'll get rid of it. If you have
But that's what the documentaries did. They disagreed with what you were doing. And you've spent the last hour and 20 minutes ranting about it.
questions about anything, go ahead. Comment section is open. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
God bless you.
God bless.
Namaste.
Namaste.
And we'll see you in the next one. All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so we did it. We did it. That's the end of that series. I hope you guys have found this at least somewhat interesting. I'm always keen to hear what you guys think. If you want to leave a comment, if you don't, obviously that's fine. I hope that I have, provided some sort of insight into the outrageous things that these two have been saying and been able to counteract that somewhat or provide a counterpoint. It's nice to be at the end of this series of videos, and I'll be very, very interested to see what happens with Twin Flames Universe going forward and, what happens with these government investigations. I would be interested in covering this group again, talking more about the cult tactics, talking about what the investigations uncover. And yeah, so I hope you've enjoyed this. Please take care of yourselves, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.